Hi, everyone. This is Glenn Shepard, and I welcome you to the program. We've got a ton to cover in a very short amount of time, so please grab a notepad and let's get busy. First, this is accredited by SHRM, the Society of Human Resource Management, for CPE credit. So if you would like a certificate of completion, please write down or take a photo of the email address on your screen and email Rebecca in my office. Secondly, I'm going to spend about 2 seconds introducing myself. I have been in management for over 30 years. I'm the author of 6 books. This presentation today is excerpted from my 4th book, which was titled How to Manage Problem Employees. Enough about me. Let's go to work. So, first, why is it so hard to find good employees right now? The photo you'll see on the screen is a famous picture taken in Chicago during the 1930s in the middle of the Great Depression. There were no unemployment benefits back then. If you didn't work, you didn't eat. These guys were starving, and they would have done anything for a job. In those days, you could put up a sign that said help wanted, and people would line up. Obviously, those days are long gone. But it goes a lot further than that. You may have heard talk about the aging workforce. Here's a little bit deeper dive into that. There are about 72 million baby boomers in America, and up until 2019, the baby boomers were the largest living generation. But then the millennials knocked the baby boomers off. They're just a little bit larger. As the baby boomers retire at a rate of 10,000 a day, mathematically, the millennials should be able to fill that gap. But one of the reasons it's not happening is because the millennials have so many more ways to make a living than baby boomers or Gen Xers did when they were in their 20s and 30s. Not just because the economy's booming and there are so many jobs out there, but also because of something called the gig economy. If you're not familiar with that term, it has to do with what they call side hustles. There's so many ways for people to make money without having a real job today. The first major way to do this was eBay back in the mid-90s. And if you're old enough to remember, Amazon launched about the same time, but nobody cared about Amazon back then. The big news was, wow, you can sell stuff in your closet and make money online. It wasn't for about a decade later that the next big player named Etsy came along, which allowed artistic people to sell their creations online. Well, not everybody's artistic. And then in 2008, this new thing called Airbnb came along, and people could rent their houses out and make good money doing it, so much money that people began buying houses just for the purpose of renting them. In 2009, Uber came along, and you could rent out your car or go drive it, not rent it out, drive it like a taxi and compete with big taxi companies whenever you felt like it. You just turned on the app. In 2010, Turo came along. If you're not familiar with them, they are to cars what Airbnb is to homes. You can rent your car, and I know someone here in Nashville who bought a second Tesla just to rent it out, and it's making him money, and he said, I get to own another Tesla for free. In 2012, Lyft came along, and I would have never in a million years have predicted they would have succeeded because Uber had already been in the market for 3 years by the time Lyft came onto the scene, but they did. The point of all this is there are so many ways for people to make money without having a standard job now. And this is just the tip of the iceberg of this gig economy. There are apps that allow you to rent your chainsaw or your garden rake to somebody who wants to rent it for a day. You can even rent space in your house, in your garage, in a closet in your house. Times have changed. And because of that, we really have to keep up as employers. So I'm going to challenge you today to be open-minded about some of the unusual things that companies are doing to now attract employees. One of the biggest changes that would have been unimaginable just a few years ago is how many colleges, or rather how many employers, no longer require a college degree. Companies like Home Depot, Lowe's, Hilton, Bank of America, and I'm not talking about cashier level positions or entry level positions. We're talking about middle management and upper positions that have historically required degrees. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, well, we're hiring more skilled professionals than that. Well, even high-tech companies have dropped their requirement for a college degree for many positions, including a little company you might have heard of called Google, Apple, and even Big Blue themselves, IBM. So even if you broaden your pool of applicants so that you'll consider possibilities you would have never considered before, how do you find people in today's market? How are all these companies doing it? Well, going back to that example from Chicago from the 1930s, one of the biggest changes that has happened since then, it's not just that you can't post or hang a sign in front of your business that says help wanted, but what most people don't realize is that it is estimated that 70% of job openings today are filled without ever being posted publicly anywhere. The term that is used is passive applicants. Passive applicants means you don't focus exclusively on the roughly 5% of the labor force that's unemployed. You start focusing on the other 95% of people who already have a job and are not out there looking. This is how you will expand your potential pool of applicants infinitesimally. Here's why this works so well. Study after study after study has found that somewhere around 3/4 of all Americans are not completely happy at their present jobs. They're not necessarily unhappy, at least not unhappy enough to go look for a new job. But what they tell us is if the right opportunity came along, they would jump ship in a heartbeat. And this is who I want you to start searching for the minute you leave work today. Wherever you go for the rest of your life until the day you retire, start watching people at their present jobs when they don't know anybody's paying attention. Whether it's the cashier at the grocery store, whether it's where you get your oil changed, whether it's somebody at the doctor's office. And every time you witness somebody who takes so much pride in what they do, they have what I call the it factor. They're so conscientious about their work that they're going to be pretty good at just about anything they do. Hand them your business card. Pull out a pen and be kind of dramatic and write on the back of your card your name and your personal cell phone number and say, you really impress me. Now, I'm not trying to poach you, not trying to get you to leave your present employer, but if you do ever think about changing jobs, and keep in mind there's about a 75% chance they are going to be thinking about it sometime soon. If you do ever think about changing your job, do us both a favor, call me first. Now, I'm a baby boomer. I'm used to actually talking on the phone. If you're trying to attract younger people, you may have to also say, here's my personal cell phone number. Text me if you'd like. And tell them they can text or call you on the weekend or at night. And footnote on that, even if they do text, that's much more comfortable for young people today. The old saying is, we have an entire generation that is great with social media, but they're not so great with social skills. If they send you a text or two, I don't like that a lot, but that leads to a conversation, which then will hopefully lead to a sit-down interview. Here's an example of a small business owner that did this very successfully. His name is Mike. He lives in Madison, Wisconsin. He attended my seminar at the University of Wisconsin. And at the time, he was in his mid-60s. He owned 6 different retail businesses, a florist, a bakery, a bridal salon. So he hired a lot of young people. It was low pay, high turnover. He came up after the seminar and he said, this is so perfect for me. I'm going to do this. He came back to my seminar when I was back in Wisconsin the next year. And he brought 2 young ladies with him named Tiffany and Amber that he had hired using this method from his local bank. They were both tellers. And I said, Mike, do you mind if I ask him some questions? He said, I knew you'd want to. That's why I brought him here to meet you today. So I said, okay, Tiffany, tell me your story. I said, you're working in a bank. You're a 21-year-old teller. Mike comes in, gives you his business card and says, you're impressive. Call me if you want to change jobs. What did you think? She said, honestly? I said, yes, honestly. She said, I thought he was a dirty old man. She said, I thought he was up to something. And I said, I never would have thought of that. She said, do you have any idea how many men hit on young bank tellers every day? And I said, well, that's fair enough. So if you thought he was up to something, why did you call him? She said, well, he was a customer and I had to be polite. So I gave him the customer service smile and said, thank you. Didn't think about calling him. But she said, a few days later, out of curiosity, I Googled him and found out that the Chamber of Commerce had named him as Business Person of the Year and that I had rushed to judgment. She said, I did call him and he had to do a little convincing, but he convinced me to come in for an interview. He hired me. Best decision I've ever made. I turned to Amber and said, tell me your story. And she laughed in my face. She said, She said, my story could not be more different than Tiffany's. She said, Mike came into my branch of the bank at 11:55 a.m., gave me his little spill. She said, I took my lunch break at 12 noon and called him from my car at 12:01, scheduled an interview at 5:15 that afternoon, and at 5:55, I accepted his offer of employment. Now, here's the interesting part about Amber's story. 21 years old, she had been at the bank for 2 years, which is an eternity when you're that young. She was okay with the low pay. She loved the location because she could walk to work. But then one thing changed that caused her to want to get out of that job, and it happens to be the number one reason people leave a job. She got a new boss she couldn't stand. She said, I was just fed up with my new supervisor that morning, and Mike walked into my branch of the bank at exactly the right time, and I did not want to go through the hassle of interviewing and having to apply for jobs, and it was just too perfect. Now, that example was from a small business, but large businesses are doing this as well. I live in Nashville, Tennessee. FedEx is based in Memphis, about 3 hours west of me. And a few years ago, when we were holding my seminar at a Chamber of Commerce there, an engineer who works at FedEx at FedEx's corporate headquarters said, I want to tell you what a big deal this is in my company. He said, there's kind of a joke at headquarters that nobody ever wants to go to lunch with the HR director because he always tries to hire the entire restaurant. And he said it's kind of annoying and even a little bit embarrassing. Ladies and gentlemen, that is who you need to be. You have got to be so proactive in today's labor market about trying to get people to come in and apply for a job with you that people actually make fun of you for being so aggressive. This is not Chicago in the 1930s. Now, I know that right about now, some of you are thinking, well, Glenn, that's fine. Small business, large business, I get that, but I'm hiring skilled labor. I need pilots or nurses or engineers or people with specific skills, and I can't hire a cashier from Walmart to work at that job. Well, don't rush to judgment. Still get your card in their hand anyway. Because even though you might be looking for somebody with a specific set of job skills for the position you currently have open, you have no idea what positions are going to be open next month or the month after that. When you witness those people who have that it factor, get your card in their hand. Here's an example of how important this is. One of my favorite companies to do business with, Southwest Airlines. They are legendary. Their employees have what they call the Southwest attitude, and they never have a shortage of applicants. They have a line of people wanting to work for them, a waiting list. It's just almost like a cult. Everybody wants to work at Southwest if you're in the airline business. Those people work hard, but they have fun too. For example, if you're married to a Southwest employee, you get to fly for free. So they actually had special shirts printed up for their single flight attendants that read, "Marry me and fly for free." This company is incredible. So a few years ago, I got to interview their president for one of my books. They're based in Dallas, Texas. Her name is Colleen Barrett. I said, Colleen, I have been wanting to ask you and Gary Kelly and Herb Kelleher, the founders of the company, this question for so many years. Where do you find such incredible employees? Everybody rants and raves about the great customer service and how everybody loves their job, and I'm one of your raving customers. She said, well, thank you for that. She said, I can answer your question in 6 words. Hire for attitude, train for skills. And I said, what do you mean by that, Colleen? She said, you go pick any employee. Go pick a baggage handler. That's an entry-level position, one of the lowest paid positions in the company. She said, I can send a baggage handler to flight school, and I can teach them how to fly a 737 if they're willing to learn. I can buy training for skills. But she said, all the money in the world cannot make you care. You have got to bring that to the job with you. She said, I will refuse to hire the most qualified pilot in the world if I don't feel like he or she has the Southwest attitude and they're not going to click with our present employees. Teamwork is paramount to us. And she said that also helps us reduce turnover, which is one reason we don't have to deal with shortages of labor like so many other companies do. So now you got some good people that you found out there. How do you get them to actually want to come in and interview with you? Well, if you're paying attention, you know that every company in the world is advertising signing bonuses and they're increasing their starting rates. Well, there's only so much money you can afford to pay. You can't just keep throwing money at people, especially when there are companies that have more money than you to throw around. So this is where we go back to sales and marketing. The cardinal rule of selling anything is that you don't sell the steak, you sell the sizzle. A friend of mine who's kind of a big shot, well, he is a big shot in the automotive industry, once said to me, Glenn, you know, the best sales rep in the world, the best salesperson for cars is not any person who's been selling cars for 30 years. It's a thing. It is the smell of a new car. He said, you give me anyone in the world, no matter how opposed they are to buying a new car, if I can get them in a brand new car and let them go drive it and just smell that, especially if it's a leather interior, he said, it's hard to get past that. That's the sizzle. Well, here's an example of how a plumber here in Nashville learned how to sell the sizzle, not the steak. His name is Jimmy Hiller, and I interviewed him back in 2005, so this was way before the current labor shortage, and he was having a hard time finding enough plumbers to hire. He ended up offering a $4,000 signing bonus, but that was still the steak. It wasn't enough sizzle. Here's how he added sizzle. He began advertising, and those days you'd do it in the newspaper and online and on the radio and on television. And he said, if you're a licensed plumber and you'll just drop by anytime and fill out an application, I will give you a gift certificate for dinner for two at Applebee's and 2 tickets to go to the movie. So movie and dinner for you and your significant other are on me just for filling out a job application. But he went on to say, if you are a licensed plumber, and keep in mind that he only had male plumbers. He said, I would love to hire a female plumber, but I've just never had a female plumber apply. So he said, he went on to say, if you're a licensed plumber and I do hire you, I will pay for a professional house cleaning service to come to your house twice a month for the first year you work for me and clean your house. And he said, Glenn, my phone started ringing off the hook. And he said it wasn't the plumbers who were calling, it was the plumbers' wives. Because no matter how politically correct you try to be, women have to do most of the house cleaning, at least here where I live in Tennessee. And he said, women were calling me saying, has my husband been by yet? Because he's going to come by there before he comes home tonight. Jimmy knew how to sell the steak, or rather sell the sizzle instead of just selling the steak. Here's how you can do the same thing. When you witness people who impress you and you hand them your business card and say, hey, if you ever think about changing jobs, call me first or text me. Come talk to me before you do anything else. Pull out a $20 bill and tear it in half. Give them half of the 20. You keep the other half and tell them if they'll come fill out an application, you'll give them the other half of the 20. It has been proven again and again and again. For $20, you will have people coming out of the woodwork to come fill out an application with you. So now you got some people coming in, how to pick out the right ones. And this, I mentioned political correctness a little earlier. We all know in today's world, you're not supposed to judge people because they're different than you are. You're not supposed to stereotype or rush to conclusions. And we try not to do that. We try to be fair and objective in hiring, but no matter how hard you try, every one of us is far more biased than we realize. For example, imagine the 2 applicants on the screen apply for a job with you. Which one would make a better impression on you? And the answer is it probably depends in part on the job you're hiring for. It probably depends on your age. But if those 2 gentlemen are identically qualified, you're still going to have, we know statistically, a more positive view of one and a more negative view of the other. The guy on the left is younger, hipper, he's got the scruffy look, he has no tie on, kind of laid back there. The guy on the right is more stiff and corporate looking, but he's also more mature and experienced and looks more like a banker or maybe a lawyer. We do judge people based on how they look. And it's not just how they look. Other things that have nothing to do with job skills will greatly impact your opinion of someone. For example, one of my personal pet peeves is especially a male job applicant who has a really weak, wimpy handshake. I don't care how qualified that person is to do the job. That guy's just made a bad impression with me. And I will tell you, long before COVID and coronavirus were part of our vocabulary, I just always was a little bit of a germaphobe. And when somebody had a really wimpy handshake, if they also had wet palms and their palms are kind of clammy, I would be wondering if there was bird flu or something growing in there, and I'd want to go wash my hands immediately afterwards. Well, the truth is the applicant might be nervous in the job interview, and a bad handshake doesn't mean they're going to be a bad employee, but it does impact your opinion of someone. Here's one that women bring up more often than men. When the applicant, male or female, is wearing so much perfume or cologne that you can still smell them an hour after they left your office. You see what I'm getting at here, ladies and gentlemen? You see the trend? All of these have nothing to do with job skills, but they will impact your final hiring decision, even if it's completely subconscious. So here's how the best companies in the world keep personal biases from getting in the way. It's called a pre-screening call. And it's just like it sounds. It means you don't Skype or FaceTime someone, at least not a video Skype. You want a regular phone call with someone before they come in for the interview, if you've not actually met them yet. And on that blind call, that blind pre-screening call, it's only going to last for a few minutes, but you're going to ask 2 or 3 of the same questions you would ask once they get to the full interview, but before you actually meet them. It sounds incredibly simplistic, and it is, but it is also incredibly effective, and I'll prove it to you right now. If you'll do this 5 times with 5 different applicants, I guarantee you at least one of the 5 times when the applicant comes in for the full interview, your first thought when you meet him is going to be, wow, he does not look anything like what I imagined he would look like. Or this is not how I pictured her looking. Well, you should not have been imagining how somebody was going to look, but it's human nature. We all do it. And this is how the best managed companies keep that human nature from getting in the way of making the best hiring decision. Next step in the process to making the best hiring decision, it's important to understand that just because somebody's good at their job doesn't mean they're a good employee. Being good at your job just makes you a good worker. In order to be a good employee, you have to be good at what you do, and you have to be relatively easy to manage. And one of the most important parts of being easy to manage is being able to follow directions. Here's a really simple way to see if somebody can follow directions before the interview even happens. Tell them to get a dictionary and to look up the definition of 2 words, job and career. Tell them to bring the dictionary to the interview. And if they look it up online, tell them to print out the definition of job and career, but tell them in advance they will not be allowed to bring their phone into the interview with them. Tell them that as soon as they sit down in your office, the first question you're going to ask is for them to read you verbatim the definition of job and career and then explain to you which one they're looking for. Ladies and gentlemen, that is a load of garbage. The real reason we ask applicants to perform this simple task is not to find out if they're looking for a job or a career, it's to find out if they can follow directions. You will be amazed at how many people will say to you, oh, I forgot. Or they'll say, well, yeah, I know you told me to get a dictionary, but I don't need a dictionary. I know what those words mean. Bye, the interview is over. Ladies and gentlemen, the interview is as good as they're ever going to be. If they can't follow directions before they get the job, they're not going to follow them any better after they're on your payroll. Next step in picking out the right person to hire, it cannot be emphasized enough how often people lie during job interviews. One of my favorite studies on this came from the University of Massachusetts. They found that over 8 out of 10 people lie during the interview, but the more interesting part of this to me was that the more outspoken or extroverted or outgoing people are, the more likely they are to lie. Regardless of what someone's personality is, there's a high probability they're not telling you the whole truth and nothing but the truth in the interview. It is your job to get the truth out of them. Here's one way you can do this. This is actually an interrogation tactic from the FBI. They've attended my seminars multiple times, and I've learned this from their agents. When someone is lying to you, they like to have a physical barrier between you and them. And this is not just job applicants. For example, if one of your kids, teenagers especially, sticks their head in the door one night, maybe you're in your bedroom getting dressed or something, and your 14-year-old sticks her head around the door and says, hey, Mom, and tells you something that doesn't sound really true to you, you just know something doesn't add up, ask them to step around from behind the door and into the room. When people are lying, they subconsciously like to stand or have something between you and where they're standing. When people are out in the open, they literally feel more exposed. And as strange as it sounds, there's a ton of behavioral psychology behind this. People are less likely to lie to you when they don't have something between you. Here's how this happens in the interview. When you've got a big desk between you and the applicant, there's the natural barrier. If at all possible, move to a conference room, or if you have some kind of seating in front of your desk where you can come out from behind your desk, by you physically having nothing between you and the applicant, they are, and not just a job applicant, anyone in general, people are statistically less likely to lie to you because it's less comfortable for them to lie. It's not something they'll consciously notice, but it doesn't cost you anything. So if you can do it, do it. Here's another way of reducing the likelihood of someone lying to you in the interview. And keep in mind, I said reducing the likelihood of, not preventing it. You can't prevent a liar from lying, but you can make yourself a less attractive target to lie to. This is another psychological principle, and it is a huge one in industrial psychology and in manufacturing and industrial engineering. It goes back to the 1920s. It's called the Hawthorne Effect. It was a classic experiment conducted at a factory outside of Chicago by Western Electric, who made telephone equipment for what came to be known as AT&T. Now, in those days, factories were not nearly as nice to work in as they are today. General Electric wanted to know if installing more light bulbs and making the factory brighter would cause people to work faster. So a plant meeting was called, and everybody was told, we're going to put in even more light, or put in more lighting and see if you work faster. They installed more lighting and everybody worked faster. And management thought, hey, we might be onto something. So they called a second meeting and said, we're going to install even more lighting and see if it makes everybody work faster. They installed even more lighting, and as you can see from this picture, that was a pretty bright factory, and people worked even faster. The executives at GE got very excited about this, because remember, this is in the 1920s when electrical lighting was still relatively new. And GE is thinking, if we can tell every business around the world that the more of our light bulbs you buy, and the brighter you make your business, the faster your employees will work, we're going to make some serious money off of this. And then one of the professors from Harvard University who was overseeing the experiment stepped up and said, no, 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 no. It is not your brighter lighting that is making people work faster. It's the fact that they know you're watching and you expect them to work faster. So in order to find out who was right, they conducted one of the most sneaky experiments in the history of industrial psychology, and it was brilliant, and it changed the way we do a lot of things in business and especially manufacturing. They announced for a third time they were going to install even more lighting in the factory, but this time they only pretended to install lighting. And guess what happened for a third consecutive time? People sped up again anyway, even though the lighting had not actually been increased, proving that GE was wrong and the professor was right, and that came to be known as the Hawthorne Effect. The Hawthorne Effect states that people change their behavior when they know someone is watching. People change their behavior when they know someone is watching. Even if you can't set up your office in a way that you can interview someone without coming or by coming from behind your desk in a conference room or sitting in front of your desk, here's something you can do for about $20 that will still greatly reduce the likelihood of someone lying to you. It's something you can hang on the wall behind your desk, or if you're interviewing somewhere else, put on the wall where people will see it, a mirror. Studies have found that when the person who is watching someone is themselves, they are still less likely to lie. People are less likely to lie, cheat, or still when they see their own reflection in the mirror as much as when they know someone else is watching. I know that sounds bizarre, but it's true, and it costs you nothing to do it. So if at all possible, put a mirror on the wall so that job applicants see their reflection in the mirror while they're interviewing with you. And I'm almost out of time here, so before I wrap this up, I have to squeeze in the single most revealing interview question you could ever ask any job applicant. This one question is so powerful that there are entire books written about this one question. This also comes from the FBI. Are you ready? What questions do you have for me? After you're done asking the applicant questions, allow him or her, in fact, require them to ask you at least 3 questions. Here's why. You will learn more about someone based on the questions they ask you than you will ever learn based on the answers they give to your questions, because people can guess the answers you want to hear to most questions. For example, if you ask 10 job applicants the following question, what are 3 of your strong points? 7 out of 10 are going to say, I'm a hard worker, and I'm dependable, and I'm a team player, because they know that's what they're supposed to say. They probably looked it up online. Can you imagine anybody answering the opposite of any of those? For example, I'm a hard worker. Can you imagine somebody coming in and saying, I really want this job, but I'm the laziest derelict you could ever hire? Isn't being a hard worker a minimum requirement even for a volunteer position? A fire chief who attended my seminar in Springfield, Missouri said, I have volunteer firefighters, but they have to work just as hard as paid firefighters because if they don't, people can die. And being dependable. Again, isn't that a minimum requirement for any job in the world, even for an unpaid volunteer position? Can you imagine someone saying, hey, I'm a great employee, but you can't count on me for anything. Whatever you do, don't give me my paycheck before lunch on Fridays because you won't see me again until Monday. And I will call out sick on Monday every time there's a big game on Sunday. And being a team player, can you imagine somebody saying, everybody hates my guts. I'm a good employee, but I'm going to run off all your other employees and your customers. These are minimum requirements for any job in the world. So let's imagine that you're down to 2 applicants and you can't decide which one to hire. They're identically qualified in every way. So you say to the first applicant, what questions do you have for me? And he says, well, I've got a question. I'm not sure if it's appropriate to ask now or not. And you say, no, now's the time to ask. Anything you want, it's fine. And he says, well, what kind of retirement plan do you offer? Yeah, love that question. Even if you don't offer a retirement plan, that tells us this guy's imagining working for you 20 or 30 years from now. Solid as a rock. Second guy, you ask if he has any questions. He says, how soon can I get an advance on my first paycheck? That's the guy whose personal life is going to be a living Jerry Springer episode. And he's going to bring that drama to work with him every single day. First applicant's imagining working for you for the rest of his career. Second applicant's just trying to figure out how to get past Friday without his pickup truck being repossessed. And you would never get that far into an applicant unless you got them to ask you questions. And that wraps up my presentation. Now I have a favor to ask of you. We need your feedback. We'd like to use your feedback and testimonials. So if you'll let us know what you liked about the presentation, if you have questions, you can also send those to Rebecca@glennshepard.com. And again, if you would like a certificate of completion, email Rebecca as well, and she'll send it to you. Thanks again, everyone.